welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. Let's start by telling you what has happened so far and what is anticipated in the next 12 hours in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The next 12 hours will be extremely critical and most worrying for Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry, in a statement 2 hours ago, has said that it is about to strike several targets in Kyiv, including those at the heart of the city. Their stated targets are sites related to Ukraine's Special Operations Unit, security services and communications. Earlier, a 64-kilometer-long convoy of the Russian armed forces was seen headed towards Kyiv. Hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles were a part of this convoy. Now, this was last reported barely 17 kilometers away from the national capital of Ukraine. Along with the convoy, satellite pictures released by Maxar also showed burnt buildings, several hangars that had been destroyed in the shelling that has taken place so far. It is the enormous cost of war caught on satellite pictures. Today, the most striking images, though, were those from Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. In the morning today, a government building was struck by a shell, leaving at least 12 people dead, as has been confirmed now by the UK government. Through the day, there was international condemnation of the pounding of Kharkiv, with a Russian missile also hitting right at the center of the town, at Freedom Square, where several political rallies have been staged in the past. It is the heart of the city, and it was torn apart today by Russian missiles. The United States today demanded that Russia be chucked out of the UN Human Rights Commission. Further sanctions were also demanded. But what exactly happened in the one battleground that everyone watched in horror through the day? Kharkiv. First, take a look at that.
Hours after peace talks in Belarus, Russia pummeled second largest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, rocking a residential neighborhood.
В результаті артобстрілу була частково зруйнована будівля облдержадміністрації, прилеглих будівель. Зруйнована сходова клітина, під завалами знаходяться люди, щонайменше вилучено рятувальниками 6 чоловік, близько 20 чоловік поранених. На місці працюють 8 одиниць пожежно-рятувальної техніки, близько 80 чоловік особового складу. Рятувальники розбирають завали, вилучають спільно з волонтерами, вилучають постраждалих та тіла загиблих. Роботи продовжуються.
Russia's intent is loud and clear, that Putin will press on with the invasion of Ukraine, defying mounting global pressure, a stand that they deny officially.
Российская армия не оккупирует украинскую территорию, принимает все меры для сохранения жизни и безопасности мирных жителей. Подчеркну, что удары наносятся только по военным объектам и исключительно высокоточным оружием.
Residents of Ukraine resisting the onslaught while bracing for a bigger assault.
Закликаємо всі держави світу негайно і дієво відреагувати на цю злочинну тактику агресора і проголосити, що Росія здійснює державний тероризм. Вимагаємо повної відповідальності для терористів в міжнародних судах.
Meanwhile, vast military columns were seen amassing just north of Ukrainian capital Kyiv. A 40-mile convoy of hundreds of tanks and other vehicles. The key goal of Russians? Kyiv saw multiple missile strikes, along with at least 3 other cities. At least 136 civilians, including 13 children, have been killed since Russia launched its invasion. This as per the UN human rights officers. The first round of talks aimed at stopping this fighting yielded only in an agreement to keep talking further. Will the next round of talks, likely to take place on Wednesday, result in resolution?
All right, in fact, let me go straight across to Times Now contributor Jonathan Gilbert, who is joining us live from Lviv. We're seeing disturbing pictures. The Russians clearly meant business when the Defense Ministry said 2 hours ago, we are going to start pounding Kyiv. Now a hospital and a TV tower have both been shelled. What more are you hearing, Jonathan?
Well, that is certainly straight out of a Russian playbook. I mean, I'm absolutely speechless. I'm astonished to hear that hospitals are being shelled. But look, they did this in Syria as well. This is widely understood that actually, and it sounds utterly inhumane, but one of Russia's military tactics in Syria was to bomb hospitals in order to dissuade people from fighting and getting patched up, I guess. So I'm speechless with anger and rage about that. But can I just introduce you very briefly? This is slightly out of left field, but this is my new friend Shubhan. Now, Shubhan is an Indian aviation student, and he, incredibly, has just escaped from Kharkiv. We've been hearing all day, haven't we, about these students who are stranded in Kharkiv, unable to escape. Well, Shubhan escaped from Kharkiv today, and just tell us exactly, tell our viewers, how you managed this amazing escape act.
Like yesterday, I just planned to leave my hostel, to escape from my hostel. Like the scenes over there were completely terrible. Like there were so many bombings, Russian tanks around, Russian soldiers, the helicopter combat fight just in front of my balcony. So that night, I just decided I just need to leave my hostel. So around 7 o'clock, I woke up. I just packed my whatever necessary things, not even like a big suitcase, just a handbag and my laptop bag. I just started marching towards Vokzal station, railway station of Kharkiv city. Like it's around like 11 to 12 kilometers away from my hostel. I just walked and walked. That's all. Like I was just check the routes, like forest, then highways. Like
and you told me that you actually had to dodge Russian tanks on the way.
I dodged around like 2 Russian tanks. I was just kneeling down, so just covering myself in the snow. That was really terrible experience for me.
And it was, I mean, you're not wearing warm weather gear, so it was snowing, you were freezing cold, you walked 10 kilometers, you dodged tanks, you also heard fighting, didn't you? Small arms fire.
Yeah, like bombings, gunfire shots, like around like 4 kilometers were remaining to reach railway station. Like around that time, I just heard like bombing, which is around like 500 meters to around 700 meters from my standing place.
Yeah. And so when you got to the railway station, the problems didn't stop there, did they?
No, like the train timings was quite unpredictable. Like we were not able to know like when the trains are going to come or they're going to come or not. Like around like Ukrainian giving first preference to Ukrainian ladies, children, and the Ukrainian people. And in the end, we were like the last in the queue, like for Indian students. Like we were completely beaten up over there, as you can see on my specs.
So basically, you made this extraordinary odyssey to the railway station. Then you eventually, after waiting 4 hours and evading a beating, you got on the train, and the train brought you here to Lviv to relative safety. And that's an extraordinary development, really, isn't it? Because we've been hearing all day about these Indian students who are trapped in Kharkiv. Well, there is a route out by the looks of it, and Shubhan is living proof of that, that if you can make your way to the railway station, even if you have to get there on foot, then there are still trains out that can bring you back here to safety, by the sounds of it.
Jonathan, thank you very much for having brought us the account of Shubham. It's incredible, really. One of the students I spoke to in the afternoon said it's literally like living in a video game, surreal, that we see tanks rolling past and men in uniform. You don't know whether they are Ukrainian criminals who've been armed, whether they are Russian troops, whether they are actual soldiers. It's a tough time. You're in a fairly crowded place. Can you tell us whether this is a crowd of people who are escaping, especially from Kyiv and Kharkiv? I have to tell our viewers, though, very important piece of information the Foreign Secretary of India today gave. No Indian nationals are remaining in Kyiv. There are 8,000 people who are currently in Ukraine. 4,000 of them are in conflict zones. 4,000 of them are in safe places. But what of the people you see around you, Jonathan? Who are they?
Well, as we've seen, Shubham, our friend here, he arrived here from Kharkiv. I just heard a station announcement saying that a train has arrived from Kyiv. So clearly what we're looking at here, I mean, if you just take a look behind me, literally hundreds of people here milling around. The guess is that most of those would have come in from the east, i.e. Kharkiv, Kyiv and surrounding areas. Now, there are people around handing out free hot drinks and hot food. Other people have been offering to put up these refugees in their private homes. So a huge coming together of humanity here, if you like. But the journey is not over for these people. Many of them...
All right, network is also an issue, but so far, thanks very much, Jonathan, for what you have done and your reporting from within Ukraine. We wish the very best to Shubham. May he get onto a flight immediately, as soon as possible. Let me go across, in fact, to the guests who are joining us now. We have with us Ambassador PP Shukla. He's been our ambassador to Russia and Ukraine. Iuliia Mendel, she's the former press secretary to the president of Ukraine. And we also have Victor Sumsky. He's a senior expert of the ASEAN Centre in the MGIMO University in Moscow. Mr. Sumsky, I want to first start by asking you, did Mr. Putin miscalculate where this was going to go?
No, I do not think so at all. And I just want to remind you that this is a work in progress. And before and when we're in the midst of such a situation, we should not be making premature conclusions. Let's wait until it gets to a point where things will be clearer than they are now. And then let me say this: the fake factory of Ukraine is operating at an increasing mode. And much of what you are getting now, and I'm saying this because as I listen to you, I compare it to the information we're getting on the Russian news channels. The situation is seriously different from what you see as you watch international TV channels.
All right, can you tell us what you are hearing is actually happening? Because we are being confirmed by Ukrainian government that 5 people have been killed in Kyiv minutes ago in a strike at a hospital and a TV tower. What are you hearing about that?
This I cannot tell you, although the news about the strike of the TV tower was on air on our TV, but people are still waiting for confirmation about what it really was and who has conducted this strike. But I may also tell you that Russian armed forces made a warning to the residents of Kyiv that there is an institution called Expert Centre number 72 of the Ukrainian armed forces, which will be under high precision strike shortly, and the civilians and the Ukrainian civilians, the Kyiv dwellers, are advised, who live in this facility, are advised to leave their homes. So I mean, what I like about this announcement also is that this is Cyber Center number 72, which gives you, I think, some idea about the scope of their operations of generating lies and misinformation. So we are certainly in the midst of such a flood of misinformation that we are incapable.
Okay, because again, we are trying to understand all points of view, Mr. Sumsky. Yes. We have this image, a satellite image released by Maxar in the morning of a 65-kilometer long ground troop convoy of Russia heading towards Kyiv. Now, what are we to make of this image?
You are to make of this image that Russia is going to block approaches to Kyiv in order not to in order to prepare for coming into the city and getting it under control, because nothing like demilitarization or denazification of Ukraine, which are the declared objectives of this operation, can be conducted without getting control over the stronghold of Zelensky regime, which is naturally the capital of the country.
So the end game of this is regime change and the removal of Mr. Zelensky. Is that how the world should understand it?
If you want my personal point of view, then I will tell you bluntly, yes, because nothing like demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine is possible without removing Mr. Zelensky from his position in the seat of power, where he had done everything to create this very tragic situation which we witness now.
Okay. Let me also bring in Iuliia Mendel, because today in the afternoon there were images released by Russia which showed that there are people in the Donbass area who are fighting along with Russian forces, and they are greeting Russian forces. We have the expert here saying that we want demilitarization of Ukraine, and that is our limited objective. Ms. Mendel.
Hi, thank you for having me here, first of all. I don't know the expertise level of Mr. Sumsky, but definitely he is correct with the fact that Russian media never tells the truth. These are just rumors of propaganda that is fueled to Russian people to justify the war that Mr. Putin is doing on our territory. When we talk about denazification or demilitarization of our country, it's just a proof of what I was getting from the Western intelligence, that Russia is going to have any concentration camps in our country. We never got the explanation what it is, but as we understand, this is something that is going to humiliate Ukrainian rights, the rights of human rights of Ukrainians, and probably we are really afraid that there could be a lot of pressure on Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian identity. This is exactly what Russia is afraid of, and to be frank, the things are so ridiculous from the point of view, why would Russia take care about the ideology that Ukraine follows until Ukraine is a peaceful country and never showed any kind of purpose of attack or, purpose of torturing or humiliating any kind of culture, any kind of person. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is of Jewish nationality, and it's really ridiculous to accuse him of some kind of Nazi ideology or whatever. And what he has been doing for the last 2 years is changing the narratives of Ukrainian identity, saying that Ukrainians are very proud of its diversity. He was always saying that we're having different languages, we're having different religions, we probably have somehow different values, but we are all united, and diversity is our huge power.
But Ms. Mendel, if I can just interrupt you for a second, the present reality is that there's a 65-kilometer long convoy which is headed towards Kyiv. Where do you see this going? Eventually, is there going to be a laying down of arms by Ukraine?
Russians are making war crimes all in the biggest territory of Ukraine. Russia has already targeted 16 regions of 25 of Ukraine, targeting civilian infrastructure. And this is a disaster because our hospitals, kindergartens and schools are being targeted. A lot of people suffer, being wounded, killed. 16 children have been killed by Russian soldiers. And in fact, Russian soldiers were really lied that they are gonna somehow save the country, and when they come to the country we get the videos from all over the regions that people really try to kick them off because they do not want to be under Russia. We never understand why would Russia behave so brutally, come to the territory of different country, kill our people.
But how long do you think the Ukrainians can hold out? Yes, the civilians are resisting, there are videos, but how long that can go on? It is a 1-to-10 ratio for every capability.
We will stand to the very end because this is our country, this is our home. Ukraine is has a long history. We have been here for centuries and centuries, and when Moscow did not exist, Kyiv was 6 centuries old already.
All right,
so
Mr. Sumsky wants to quickly respond, and I really must bring in Ambassador Shukla as well. Yes, Mr. Sumsky.
Please. Thank you.
Yes, a very short remark. If you want to know a real story of brutality, you have to go to Donbass. You have to see the graves of innocent children, which were killed by dozens by the Ukrainian Nazis. And of course, all that happened under the Zelensky government. And I have to say that to me, the epitome of lying and creating fake news today is what Ms. Mendel has just been telling you.
Okay, and this
I
is
would
where
like to tell to the Russian audience that there is a Telegram channel that is full of video and photos of Russian dead soldiers and captured soldiers. There are names there and where they belong to which unit. Please tell your people to find their beloved brothers, husbands, and sons in the Telegram channel Ishi Svoich.
This is where I bring in Ambassador Shukla as well. Sir, for the world, and it's very clear that the differences are very, very sharp. One day from now, we are told the second round of talks may happen. What do you realistically think will actually happen?
I think talks will happen. You know, I just want to give a little bit by way of background. I have lived in Moscow for 11 years. And I opened the embassy in Kyiv, and I had a very happy time there for almost a little less than 2 years. It's very painful for me to see what the two countries are doing to each other. And if I were to give some advice, unsolicited, I would say that, you know, in the case of Russia, a claim to Crimea is, you could possibly understand why they feel that way. Firstly, the parallels with Kosovo are almost exact, and the wishes of the people of the Crimea are also pretty clear. Beyond that, it becomes very hard, even for a friend like me of Russia, and I count myself as a friend of Russia, it becomes very difficult to explain what is now happening in terms of targeting cities like Kharkiv. And now, as to what is likely to happen, I think the second round of talks will take place. I have very carefully read the statement made by Mr. Medzinski, that is the leader of the Russian delegation and of the Ukrainian delegation. Seems to me both of them are keen to continue the dialogue. Mr. Medzinski even suggested that there were some potential points of agreement. But I do not believe that there will be any let-up in the fighting, even as the talking goes on.
So, sir, for how long?
And the reason is that...
Is this a 7-day war? Is this a 7-month war? Is this a 7-year war? What are we looking at?
All right, I'll tell you my assessment. I believe that the realistic target for the Russians on a longer term basis is Mariupol. They want one consistent land link from Russian territory to the Crimea. They have got everything else. There is only this little gap in Mariupol, and I believe they will concentrate on Mariupol. And of course, the second part is going to be the concentration on Kyiv. Now, they will, with their overwhelming force, they will probably succeed in driving the government, the military, and everybody else out of the city, and maybe even set up some kind of provisional government. But it's not going to work. You know, since the days of Vietnam, we have seen that an insurgency is almost impossible to defeat so long as they have sanctuaries across the boundary. And in this case, they're going to have not just sanctuaries, but sources of military hardware and financing. You know, the entire western coast and the southern coast of the Black Sea is all NATO countries. And none of them is going to accept what the Russians are planning to do in the entirety of Ukraine.
So,
there is going to be a prolonged insurgency that will follow if at all Kiev falls.
Mr.
And by the
Sumsky,
way, there is still some fighting left.
The ambassador's assessment is concise. You're sitting, or you may be setting yourself up for a Vietnam. This could be Russia's Vietnam.
Well, much as I respect the opinion of Ambassador Shukla, I find it a little simplistic. And also, let me tell you two things which I think will be very important for understanding anything that is happening now in Ukraine. Number one, Ukraine had been and remains a deeply split country. I do not know. I think Ms. Mendel understands it better than anybody in this dialogue.
I don't know how you can sit in Russia and tell me about my country. Ukraine is a super united country. We never had any conflicts about Russian or Ukrainian language that you try to feed us with. You cannot sit in a different country and tell me about my country. There are hundreds and thousands of troops in my country, and they're from Russia, and they're killing my people, my friends.
You have been killing your people in Donbass for 8 consecutive years. That's what you've been doing.
And you have no respect.
The killers first and foremost are you.
You are a liar
who have been shelling Donbass for 8 years.
You don't have the right to speak and to
you've been doing it all to civilians.
You came to my country and you're killing my people.
Mr. Sumsky, whatever the objective might be, are you categorically denying the use of cluster bombs or pressure bombs today? The president of Ukraine today said Russia, by the usage of these banned munitions, has now proven itself a terrorist state.
I think that if anybody has proven itself a terrorist state, this is Mr. Zelensky and his crowd, because the tactic they are employing is the tactic of terrorists who are using civilians as shields when they confront the Russian army. That's as far as terrorism is concerned. Number two, I would not trust anything. Any smallest piece of information that comes from the camp of Mr. Zelensky.
From the world, let's say, from the world. From CNN, from Fox News, from Canada, from all the European media, from any part of the world. Only Russia is correct. Mr. Zelensky is the president who has been democratically elected by a record 73% of people. Ukraine has never met such kind of democracy as electing of this president. And he's standing here as the leader, showing his people that the state will stand for their security till the very end. And when the United States kindly offered to take him out of Kyiv, he said, no, I will stay here with my people to the very end. All the world is prizing now Mr. Zelensky. And when Mr. Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, is speaking in Geneva online, where he was not allowed because of sanctions, then the majority of countries just went out of the room. Russia is a disrespected country because you're killing people here. You are killing people. You are a killer.
Mr. Sumsky?
Nobody is killing your people at this moment, and Russia is taking a lot of care not to hurt Ukrainian civilians. This is number one. And number two, as far as listen, you must stop, for God's sake. I have listened to you. I have listened to your tirade, and now let me speak. Shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up.
Out of my country.
The floor was given to me, and I have to speak.
Leave my country. Ukraine is an independent democracy. Russia has never known what is democracy. Russia is a dictator country. Leave my country.
All right.
Now let me speak. And let me just bring one point, which is essentially this is not a war of Russia against Ukraine. It is a war of Russia against those who are standing behind Ukraine. What we know is the collective West, and of course the United States, and the CIA and the CNN, which is the tool of American government, of whom Mr. Zelensky is nothing but a marionette.
Mr. Sumsky, I want to ask you a more specific question about the ramifications of what sanctions you are inviting. Are you not afraid, or is Russia not afraid, that this will cripple your country?
Well, this is, of course, what the West is propagating, but let me tell you something. Historically, Russia has been, for centuries, living under some kind of sanctions of the West. And this is our traditional mode of operation, and we are very well adjusted to that. Number two, we have been going through this sanctions exercise for the last 8 years, and we have developed, I think, a rather strong immunity to much of what we have been subjected to. I think the United States and their allies have a very poor understanding of the economic changes that had happened in Russia during the last 2 decades, and just, you know, to finalize that short statement, we have a very clear impression now that much of this story has been told on air and online, that Russia had been very diligently preparing for this hysterical round of sanctions for several years now, and I think we will withstand it.
All right, it's interesting you say that Russia had been preparing for these sanctions quite a few hours in, quite a few years in the making.
Of course, because the sanctions were going on and on since 2014. And we have got very early the idea that this will last forever. That's why we were preparing for the West. We were prepared.
All right. So you're saying the sanctions would have happened irrespective of whether you took these measures against Ukraine or not?
Of course. This is just because we are Russia, and we are considered the greatest impediment to American hegemonism.
All right, Ambassador Shukla.
Yeah, right. Look, I do feel a sneaking sympathy for Mr. Sumsky. I think he is right. There is a certain problem in the West with Russia. Actually, when I was still working there as a young officer in the 70s, I came across a letter from Tsar Alexander to his son, Nikolai II, the last Romanov Tsar. And he writes to him that the West is scared of our side. So I think, discounting for the passion with which Mr. Sumsky speaks, I would say that there is a kernel of truth in what he is saying. And yet I think there could be other policies which Russia could have followed in order to at least allay the fears of the immediate neighborhood. I agree that America has been relentless in its hostility right from 1991, although they have shown one major bit of generosity, which is admitting Russia as a permanent member of the Security Council without due process of amendment of charter. But apart from that, yes, they have been relentless in their hostility. Fair enough. But I think to say that they are prepared for the kind of sanctions that they are facing today, I know I saw the live recording of the Russian Security Council meeting, and yes, every one of them, especially Mr. Medvedev, said that they are ready for the sanctions and they expect that they will be lifted in 2 or 3 years. But it may not quite be so simple. Above all, what strikes me, the ruble has fallen to $100 rubles to a dollar, and interest rates have gone up to 20%. Now, 20% interest rate, bank rate, is something no economy can stand. Even America, at the height of its vigor in the 70s, or rather it was stagnant, but still it was still a very resilient economy, fell into recession.
So, sir, let me ask you this, going by what you said earlier, that we could be in this for the long haul. Will the Russian economy be able to survive this long haul?
A lot is going to depend on what sort of responses there are from countries like China.
It's interesting you mentioned China, because today Chinese foreign minister called up his Ukrainian counterpart and said, I am sorry for the hostility. Is there a miscalculation? And that's why I started by asking, did Mr. Putin miscalculate his friends and foes? China may not have backed him in the way that he hoped. Ambassador Shukla.
Oh, you're asking me? Okay. Look, the Chinese are playing a very clever game right now. Yes, in public they are saying many of the right things. They are upholding Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. But they are also saying no expansion of NATO, and they don't believe that you can enhance your security at the expense of another. You know, these are trite kind of shibboleths which really don't have any operational meaning behind them.
Okay, but when it comes to the resistance of Ukraine and Western unity, was there a miscalculation there?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. I think the kind of responses that we have seen from countries like Germany, Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, I think it's very clear that the Russians have underestimated the kind of be. And you know, I tell you something else. No matter how much there is inside Russia, there is we really don't know for sure. There seems to be some questioning going on about the wisdom of what is happening. But you know, the word will spread when you are hitting, say, the Judo Federation. You're hitting the Football Federation. When all of these teams are expelled, the IOC is banning Russia. Then the word will spread throughout the country that somehow we have been completely isolated. Now, I just want to finish the thought on the economic side. I think a lot will depend on the kind of clandestine networks that will immediately spring into operation. And I think this is where the long border between China and Russia will play a very important role. Will China actually join in with? I don't know, because the Chinese are also very dependent on Russian raw material. And I don't know if they can completely shut one tap or the other tap, either way.
Okay.
So this is the only question mark. Otherwise, I think economically, it's probably a bigger hit than they were anticipating.
All right, so a lot of balls up in the air right now, but when it comes to actual action on the ground, there have been 2 strikes in Kyiv already. Kharkiv was strafed through the day as well. I will just take a final question from you, Mr. Sumsky. Was there a miscalculation by Mr. Putin vis-a-vis his friends and allies?
I do not think so. Whenever his friends and allies are questioned today, you have to understand that Putin played it very cool, and nobody, no global leader is better familiar with the mentality of the Chinese, with their real aspirations, and with what to expect from them and not to expect from them with Mr. Putin. And Mr. Putin had on numerous occasions shown how calculating and highly rational and also very cautious he is. If he had taken a decision like the one he has taken now, this is just because there was no other way to do it but to do it that way. And he confirmed it himself, by the way. So I put a lot of trust in his abilities, by the way.
All right, we'll just leave it at that. But actions have consequences when we're talking about the surprising stand of China. Also remember that while NATO condemned Russian action in Ukraine, UK, US, again Boris Johnson went on record today to say our forces will not fight alongside Ukrainian forces against Russia. He was categorical in saying that as well. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, both gentlemen, and Iuliia Mendel for having joined us. We'll keep a close eye on what happens overnight.